If you've ever believed that compassion doesn't always need a spotlight, that sometimes the smallest gestures, like a spoonful of food or a seat shared in silence, can reach deeper than any grand speech, then this story is for you. We invite you to hit that like button and subscribe to Justice Reloaded HD, where we uncover the quiet heroes walking among us, people who don't ask for applause, but whose kindness changes lives in the most unexpected places. Because today, we're not going to a hospital.
Not a shelter.
Not even a home. We're going to a quiet corner of the public library, where a waitress, a disabled child, and a father carrying more pain than he shows, cross paths over a lunch that was never supposed to happen, yet changed everything.
Stay with us.
You won't want to miss this. The second floor of the downtown public library was hushed as always, especially the children's reading section tucked into the far corner, where soft carpets muted footsteps and pastel-colored cushions surrounded tiny tables. It was nearing noon, and golden sunlight streamed through the tall windows, slanting across rows of picture books and casting gentle shadows. Most of the chairs were empty, except one. A little boy sat alone at the smallest table, a plastic lunch container in front of him, unopened. His hands rested limply at his sides. Noah Warren was 6 years old. His fine, brown hair fell slightly over one eye, and his posture hinted at the quiet exhaustion of a child born with challenges. Cerebral palsy made even the simple act of lifting a spoon feel like moving mountains. The corners of his lips twitched, not in a smile, but in uncertainty, as though unsure if he was allowed to ask for help again. His father, Ellis Warren, had dropped him off moments earlier, leaving him under the usual care of his professional nanny. But today, she was late. And so Noah waited, seated properly like he had been taught, his lunch slowly growing cold. Then the spoon slipped from his trembling fingers. It clinked softly onto the linoleum floor. He stared at it, eyes wide, shoulders shrinking inward. A tear threatened to roll, but he blinked quickly, holding it back the way brave little boys try to do when no one's watching. Except someone was. From the elevator corridor, Lena Torres balanced a tray of coffee and sandwiches for the regulars who worked upstairs. She didn't plan to stop. But something about the stillness of that boy caught her eye. Not just the lunch.
Not just the fallen spoon.
But the kind of silent panic that reminded her of another little boy she once loved with everything she had. Her younger brother. Gone now. She hesitated. Then set the tray on a bench, walked over slowly, crouched beside the child. Her voice, when it came, was softer than the rustle of turning pages. "Hi there," she said gently. "Would it be okay if I helped you a little?" Noah didn't answer, but his eyes met hers. He didn't pull away. "I used to feed my baby brother just like this," Lena continued, easing the lunchbox open and finding the small spoon tucked inside. "He had a hard time holding things too. We figured it out together." She dipped the spoon into the lukewarm mashed potatoes and offered it, not too close, not too fast. Noah blinked again. Then leaned in, opened his mouth. The first bite was slow. She waited before offering the second. In that entire library, no one else seemed to notice. No one whispered. No one stared. It was just Lena and the boy. Just the rhythmic, patient motion of spoon to mouth, and the careful wipe of a napkin at the corners of his lips. Behind a bookshelf, in a shadowed corner where he thought he was unseen, Ellis Warren stood still. He had returned to drop off a book. Or so he told himself. But his eyes no longer scanned titles. He wasn't reading. Not with his hands. Not with his mind. He watched as the young woman, one he'd barely registered before, fed his son without hesitation, without pity. She wasn't performing a duty. She wasn't being paid. She didn't seem to care that no one was looking. And in that quiet, sacred corner of the library, something stirred in him. He didn't know what it was yet. But he knew this. He hadn't seen his son this calm in weeks. Not during therapy. Not with the nanny. Not even with him. And the only sound was the soft clink of spoon against container, followed by the tiniest sigh from a little boy who had, for once, not been rushed. The cafe was winding down for the night. The clink of silverware in the sink, the low hum of the espresso machine shutting down, and the faint jazz playing from the overhead speaker marked the end of another long shift. Lena Torres wiped down the last table, her apron loose at her waist, the ties untied as if signaling she was already halfway out the door. She reached for her tip folder, the same black leather one she used every night. But when she opened it, something else slid out, folded neatly, the handwriting unfamiliar. She stared at it for a moment before unfolding the single line scrawled in firm, measured script. "If you could have lunch with my son tomorrow, I would be deeply grateful." There was no name. But there didn't need to be. Only one man had stood watching from the library stacks that afternoon. And only one little boy had needed her in a way that made her chest ache long after the moment passed. Lena held the note in her hand for a long time. She didn't move. She didn't smile. She didn't even know how to feel. This wasn't a job offer. There was no mention of pay, no request to become a nanny, no scheduling detail, just a single strangely human appeal. And behind the formality, she could sense the trembling honesty of someone who wasn't used to asking for help. She folded the paper back and slid it into her pocket. That night, sleep didn't come easy. She lay awake in the small apartment she rented 2 bus stops from the library, the ceiling fan flickering shadows against the walls. She thought of her brother, of all the time she'd sat beside his hospital bed feeding him lukewarm soup in silence, of how meals became their language when words failed. She thought of Noah, the way he blinked with so much caution, the way he leaned into the spoon like he was still testing if the world could be gentle. By morning, the decision had already been made in her chest, even if her mind hadn't caught up. She packed her own lunch for the first time in weeks, simple rice and grilled chicken, a sliced pear, and a tiny juice box she added without thinking, like she used to for her brother. Then she added a second spoon to her bag. Just in case. The walk to the library felt different that day. The sun filtered through tree branches with a kind of golden warmth that didn't press too hard. She climbed the stairs to the second floor and turned toward the children's section. And there he was. Noah sat at the same table, his small hands folded in his lap, a lunch container in front of him. But this time, his eyes were on the door. Waiting. When he saw her, something shifted in his face. Not a grin, not a spark of energy, but a soft, slow smile that curled at the edges like paper warmed by sunlight. Lena approached without a word, setting her lunch beside his. She slid into the chair across from him. Before she could even open the lid of her container, Noah spoke. His voice was quiet, almost too soft to hear. "You eat first today," he said. "Then me." Lena blinked. The child who yesterday wouldn't lift a spoon unless someone helped, now wanted to wait. To watch. To give her space to eat too. She smiled and nodded. "Deal," she whispered, opening the rice and taking a small bite. Noah watched, his head tilted slightly. When she was halfway through, he reached for his spoon. Missed it the first time. Tried again. This time, he didn't drop it. They didn't talk much that lunch. But it didn't matter. Words weren't the point. It was the presence. The stillness between two people sharing a meal without expectation, without hurry. Just a quiet corner in a public place where somehow, trust had made room for something tender. And behind the frosted glass on the library's upper floor, someone watched again, but he didn't move. Not yet. The lunches became a quiet ritual, unspoken, unfussy, and always on the second floor of the library. Every day around noon, Lena would climb the stairs balancing 2 containers, one with her own food, and one she gently reheated in the cafe's microwave for Noah. No announcements were made. No introductions. It simply became what they did. They sat across from each other at the same small table by the window, surrounded by picture books and the faint rustle of pages. The library's hush worked in their favor. It offered space for slowness, for moments that weren't rushed by the ticking of a clock or the demands of a world that had no patience for softness. At first, Lena still had to guide Noah's spoon. Not because he was unwilling, but because the tremor in his wrist and the stiffness in his fingers made it hard to balance the food. He'd grip the plastic handle with quiet determination, jaw clenched, trying not to let his frustration show. And Lena, always steady, would say nothing. She simply waited. Or she gently covered his hand with hers, guiding the motion without drawing attention. But over the days that followed, something shifted.
It apnée d'une pièce. Subtle, beautiful.
One afternoon, Lena pointed to the back of a juice box and traced the letters printed there with her finger. "Milk," she sounded out slowly.
Can you say it with me?
Noah stared at the box. Then at her mouth. Then he tried. "My mill," he whispered. "Close," she said, smiling. "Try again." He did. And the next day, he pointed to the same word before she could even ask. "Milk," he said, more sure of himself. Bit by bit, Lena added more letters, more words. She drew vowels on napkins with crayons from the children's shelf. She made rhymes out of the things in his lunch: pear and chair, rice and mice. Noah giggled once when she said peas and knees. It was a sound so small, so rare, that she caught her breath mid-laugh. But it wasn't just language that grew. Noah started to hold his spoon longer. His grip steadied. His chewing slowed. He stopped rushing like he used to, no longer panicked by the fear of choking or the pressure to finish fast. He took his time, because no one here was hurrying him. And then one day, he did something neither of them expected. Lena had taken a few bites from her own meal, glancing at Noah between chews. But when she paused to reach for a napkin, she turned and saw him holding his spoon out, toward her. A little awkward, a little clumsy, but unmistakable. "For you," he said. "You eat too."
Lena blinked.
Then laughed softly, covering her mouth. She leaned in and let him feed her a small scoop of mashed carrots. "Thank you, kind sir," she said, bowing her head theatrically. That was 5-star service. Noah beamed, his smile crooked and proud. What neither of them saw, what neither of them even suspected, was that far above them, just past the mezzanine railing on the 3rd floor, someone was watching. Ellis Warren stood alone, one hand resting on the cool glass pane that overlooked the children's section. He had come up to take a phone call, or so he told himself. But when the call ended, he hadn't moved. He stayed. For 10 minutes. Then 15. Then 30. He didn't understand what kept him there, why his feet wouldn't carry him back to the elevator. He only knew that the scene below, his son quietly offering a spoonful of carrots to a young woman who met him with so much grace, it didn't look like therapy. It didn't look like progress charts or structured interventions. It looked like connection. And for the first time in a long while, Ellis didn't feel the urge to intervene. He didn't want to fix anything. He just stood there and watched. It was a Thursday, cloudy, quiet, the kind of day when time moved slower than usual. Lena had just finished setting down Noah's lunch when she noticed something different. He didn't reach for the spoon right away. He was smiling, yes, but fidgeting too, glancing occasionally toward the stairwell like he was waiting for something, or someone. That someone appeared 5 minutes later. Ellis Warren stepped into the children's section not like a father dropping by, but like a man walking into a boardroom, precise, focused, emotionally armored. His dark overcoat was still buttoned, despite the warm air, and his polished shoes echoed on the tiled floor. Lena looked up, surprised. She hadn't seen him this close since that first silent moment behind the bookshelf. She straightened up instinctively, wiping her hands on a napkin, her voice polite.
Monsieur Warren.
He gave a curt nod, eyes flicking to Noah for a moment before settling on her. "Could we speak privately?" She glanced at Noah, who was now busy arranging the napkin in his lap with quiet concentration. Lena nodded and followed Ellis a few steps toward the hall just outside the reading area. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't show anger. But the tension in his jaw betrayed something deeper, a strain pulled tight over time. I've seen the progress, he began. Noah eats better. He smiles more. And for that, I should be grateful. Lena stayed silent. She sensed a but coming. Ellis exhaled, barely. But I can't allow this to continue. Lena's brow furrowed. I don't understand. You're a waitress. You work downstairs. You have a life, responsibilities, people who count on you, he paused, as though trying to choose his next words carefully. Eventually, you'll move on. Find another job. Leave the city.
Fall in love.
Whatever it is, you'll leave. She blinked. Mr. Warren. He cut her off gently, but firmly. My son has lost enough. His mother. 2 caregivers in a year. Every time he begins to trust someone, they disappear. And I can't, his voice faltered just slightly. I can't keep watching him get attached to people who won't stay. There was a long silence between them. Not cold. Just heavy. Then, Ellis reached into the inside pocket of his coat and pulled out an envelope. He extended it toward her. I've done the math, he said. This is twice your current salary at the cafe. Consider it a thank you bonus, in exchange for no longer visiting my son. Lena stared at the envelope like it was a foreign object. For a moment, her chest clenched. Not from insult, but from heartbreak. She looked back into the children's room. Through the open doorway, she could see Noah twisting the straw into his juice box, humming to himself. Oblivious. Trusting. Then she looked back at Ellis, this powerful man, this grieving father, standing there with desperation dressed up as logic. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't reject the money with dramatic flair. She simply stepped back and said softly, "Your son isn't eating better because of me." Ellis's expression didn't change, but he didn't look away either. He's eating better, Lena continued, because someone's finally sitting across from him. Someone who isn't rushing. Someone who isn't paid to fix him. Someone who just shows up with a spoon and stays until the lunch is over. She glanced again toward the boy in the room. I didn't come here to make him get attached. I came to make sure he didn't have to eat alone. And with that, she turned and walked back inside. She didn't look at the envelope again. She didn't wait for a reply. Ellis remained standing in the hallway, his hand still half extended, the envelope untouched. Behind him, the hush of the library folded over everything. And in front of him, a woman knelt beside his son once more, lifting a spoon with no expectations, no contract, no promise of forever. Just presence. The next day, the clock struck noon just like always, but something was different. The second-floor reading corner sat unusually still, as if even the air had noticed the absence. Noah Warren sat at the tiny table by the window, his lunch in front of him, untouched. The lid of the container was still sealed. The spoon sat beside it, gleaming under the soft light. But the boy didn't move. He wasn't fidgeting or playing with his napkin like he usually did. He wasn't craning his neck to see if anyone was coming up the stairs. He just sat there, waiting, hoping. But Lena never arrived. From the railing above, Ellis watched his son in silence. He had delayed a meeting to be here, thinking perhaps he could explain things to Noah, help him understand the change. Or maybe, if he was honest, he had simply wanted to reassure himself that his decision had been the right one. Now, standing there, he wasn't so sure. He came down slowly, each step of the spiral staircase feeling heavier than the last. When he reached the children's corner, he approached Noah with careful steps, not wanting to startle him. "Hey buddy," he said softly, crouching down beside him. "How about we eat together today?"
Juste you and me.
Noah didn't look up. His hands were folded tightly in his lap. Ellis opened the container, setting the spoon gently in front of him. He reached for a napkin, then the thermos of juice, arranging everything just as Lena used to. He picked up the spoon, scooped a bite of mashed potatoes, and held it out. Noah didn't move.
Smon, kiddo. Just one bit.
Still nothing. Ellis tried again, this time with a softer tone, bringing the spoon a little closer. Noah shook his head. His lips pressed into a tight line. Ellis's hand began to tremble slightly. He hadn't done this in years, not since his wife was alive. Feeding Noah had always been her rhythm. After she passed, the job was given to professionals. Therapists. Specialists. People with training and patience. Ellis swallowed hard. He felt the awkwardness of the spoon in his hand, the distance between father and son that no wealth or planning could erase. "Noah," he said again, more quietly now. "Please." The boy looked at him then, not with anger, not even with sadness. Just a kind of tired understanding. And finally he spoke. "Dad." His voice was small, almost fragile. "Please don't be mad at Miss Lena." Ellis blinked. Noah looked down at his folded hands. "She's the only one who ever fed me, without looking at me like I was broken." The words hung there, suspended in the stillness of the library. Ellis felt them hit, not like an accusation, but like a mirror turned toward him. In all the therapy sessions, all the routines, all the logistics, had he ever once sat across from his son and simply eaten lunch with him? Had he ever offered presence, not correction? He set the spoon down. Not because he was frustrated, but because something inside him was unraveling. Slowly. Quietly. It wasn't about the food. It had never been about the food. Lena hadn't just fed Noah. She had given him dignity. She had sat with him as an equal, not a patient, not a problem. Just a child. A boy worthy of being seen, not managed. And Ellis, for all his power and planning, had never truly seen that. He reached across the table and gently placed his hand over Noah's. "I'm not mad at her," he said at last, his voice barely above a whisper. "Not anymore." Noah didn't reply. But for the first time that day, his fingers relaxed slightly. They didn't eat that lunch. But maybe something more important had been swallowed instead, something hard, something unspoken. A lesson. And a beginning. The cafe was quiet during the mid-morning lull. The scent of brewed coffee lingered in the air, mingling with the faint clatter of dishes from the kitchen and the low hum of a jazz tune playing through the speakers. Lena was behind the counter, refilling sugar containers and wiping down trays. Just another day, just another shift. She didn't expect to see him. But when she looked up, Ellis Warren was there, standing at the far end of the counter. No assistant, no security, no pretense, just him. The same overcoat, the same carefully composed expression, though this time something in his face looked unguarded. Like a man not coming with answers, but with questions he didn't quite know how to ask. Lena set the tray down and walked over slowly. "Mr. Warren," she said softly. He nodded once, then glanced at the stool across from her. "May I?" She gestured for him to sit. No small talk. No coffee offered. There was a long pause, during which Ellis seemed to gather himself. His fingers traced a circle on the countertop, as if waiting for the words to come. "I came," he began, "not to apologize, though perhaps I should." Lena didn't interrupt. "I don't need a new caregiver," he continued. "Noah doesn't need more therapy schedules, more experts, more perfection." He looked up then, meeting her eyes directly. "I need you to teach me how to sit with my son." Lena blinked. "I need you to show me," he said slowly, "how to be there in silence. Without fixing. Without rushing. Just there. So that he can feel like he matters. Like he's not a task, or a project, or a burden. Just a boy. Worth sitting beside." It wasn't said with emotion, not in the conventional sense. His tone was still calm, still measured. But beneath the surface was a rawness that didn't need tears to be felt. Lena looked at him for a long moment. She thought about all the time she'd sat with Noah, watched him fumble and try again, never once needing to be perfect. She thought of the quiet dignity of those lunches, the peace in just being with someone without judgment or instruction. Then she smiled, gentle, understanding, not triumphant. "It's not complicated," she said. "But it's not easy either." Ellis nodded once, waiting. "You sit down," she said. "You open your own lunch. You eat with him, not before, not after. At the same time." She leaned on the counter, folding her arms lightly. "You don't correct his grip. You don't tell him to chew slower or sit straighter. You don't watch the clock." He listened as though her words were scripture. "You just be there," she finished. "Not to guide. Just to share the table." Ellis sat back slightly, the breath he let out almost imperceptible. Lena picked up a spoon from the tray she had been cleaning, turned it over in her hand once, and set it gently on the counter between them. "Start there," she said. "And maybe he'll start reaching for you too." For a brief moment, the noise of the cafe disappeared, the bustle, the music, the dishes. It was just two people, seated across from each other, trying to understand how healing could happen in the simplest of places. Ellis picked up the spoon, not like a man grasping at instruction, but like someone holding a possibility. "Thank you," he said quietly. Lena just nodded. "Don't thank me yet," she said. "Lunch isn't served until you show up." The second floor of the library looked a little different now. What used to be a quiet corner tucked between picture books and oversized beanbags had been transformed, gently respectfully, into a space that felt like it had always been waiting to exist. A small wooden sign hung above the archway, carved with simple lettering, "Lunch and Listen." There were no flashy colors, no cartoon characters, no laminated posters shouting rules. Just a row of child-sized tables with soft, rounded corners and comfortable chairs. Each table was set for two. One spot for the child. One spot for the companion. It wasn't a program. There were no scheduled volunteers or name tags.
No loud announcements.
Just an open invitation, for any child who struggled with eating alone, and any adult willing to sit with them in silence. In the far corner, by a sunny window, a quote had been painted onto the wall in soft, handwritten script. "Every meal is a story that doesn't need words, so long as someone is willing to sit through it." The idea had been Lena's. The funding, Ellis's. But the heart behind it belonged to both. They didn't call it therapy. They didn't call it outreach. They simply called it what it was, a space to be present. To eat, to listen, to share time, without demands, without pressure. Noah had been the first to use it. He still came every day, though now he needed no help to open his lunch. He unfolded his napkin with a steady hand. Picked up his spoon with fingers that only trembled if he was excited. He no longer panicked when food didn't sit just right or when juice spilled. He simply cleaned it up and kept going. And some days, when the meal was done, he would pull out a book from the nearby shelf and begin to read aloud. His voice was soft, but sure. Children would turn their heads. Some would scoot their chairs closer. Others simply listened while pretending not to. And always, someone sat across from him. Sometimes his father, sometimes Lena, sometimes a quiet-faced librarian or a parent who had wandered in and decided to stay. Ellis had learned how to be still. At first he struggled, not with the silence, but with what the silence revealed. The part of him that always felt the need to control, to measure, to fix. But slowly, day by day, he let that part loosen. He learned how to simply chew. To look his son in the eye. To take bites between stories and offer nods instead of corrections. He hadn't expected peace to come from plastic utensils and brown paper bags. But it had. Lena, for her part, never took credit. She still worked the cafe downstairs, still wore the same navy apron with her name stitched slightly crooked. But sometimes, on her break, she'd come up with her lunch in hand and take a seat beside a child she didn't know. No one ever asked her to. She just showed up. And somehow, that had become the point. Lunch and Listen grew, slowly but steadily. A teacher started bringing a student who didn't speak. A grandmother began coming with her grandson who couldn't chew unless someone ate beside him. Word spread, not through flyers, but through whispers and warm eyes. It was never about fixing anyone. It was about not letting anyone eat alone. Noah, now confident and steady, would sometimes look around the room mid-bite, his eyes scanning each table. He didn't always speak, but when he did, it was usually to offer something simple, an extra napkin, half a sandwich, a smile that said, "You're not alone here." And when he finished his lunch, he'd close his container with a satisfying click, wipe his mouth, and reach for a book. Because for Noah, healing hadn't come from someone who knew all the answers. It had come from someone who simply chose to stay. If you believe that even a quiet lunch can heal a lonely heart, then leave a like on this video and subscribe to Justice Reloaded HD, so you'll never miss the moments that speak softly, but stay with us forever.